I connected with author Emily Karmazin, as I do with most of my guests, through Instagram. She's an author of cozy mysteries, and it's been a while since I've had someone like her on the show, so please join me in welcoming Emily as this month's interviewee. Emily, thank you for agreeing to do the interview. It's great to have you on the show. Tell me about your work and what it is that you write.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. So I write into very different genres. I write mysteries, which have a tendency to more cozy, and then urban fantasies, which are not cozy. There's a little bit more, as some of my readers said, a little bit more spice, a little bit more darker side in the urban fantasies. And so it's two very different sides, but I like to think that, in most of us there are two sides, and it's good to explore both, or many, depending.
That's awesome. So when you say cozy mysteries, I had someone on the show a few years ago that did cozy mysteries. That's more like the kind of stuff that you would see on like Hallmark Channel, right?
I like to compare. I like to say my Lexi and Zelda books are very more murder she wrote
Okay.
meets like Golden Girls, Supernatural. There's always a little bit of a supernatural thing in there. Um, but yeah, much more of a murder she wrote. It's much more of kind of like a retro vibe. In one of the books, one of their love interests is basically like a Magnum PI dude, because they're in Hawaii, and it was like that's super fun, and everybody remembers that from when they were kids watching it. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a fun read. Nothing salacious happens on the page, of course,
It's all inferred.
and yeah, it's PG-13, and where my urban fantasy, I would say, is definitely rated R.
That's awesome. So how did you get into writing? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or did you just wake up one morning, you're sipping your coffee, and you're like, I want to write a book?
Gosh, I wish. Those people seem to have like immediate success. Um, legitimately. Yeah, no, it was always a dream of mine to be a writer. Um, Back in the day and in middle school, my best friend Jenny and I, we used to write stories when we probably should have been studying and doing other things in class. And we would get on the bus to ride home, and we would switch stories.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, yeah. And she's actually, our relationship is actually the inspiration for my Lexi and Zelda cozy mysteries. So she's a big part of it. So yeah, it was always there, but life, everyone always told me, oh, you're never going to make a living on it. Oh, don't waste your time with that. It's not worth it. And, I listened to too many people for too long. And then about 15 years ago, NaNoWriMo National Writing Month,
Mhm.
a friend was doing it. And I thought, well, gosh, I've always wanted to. Let's see if I can do it. And I did it. And that was the very first manuscript I wrote. And 15 years later, it's still sitting on the laptop, and it will probably be there for a little while longer. um, but then during COVID, I was sitting here and I was like, I have 5 manuscripts on my laptop. What am I doing? So I guess that was my coffee cup moment, because I thought, it's now or never, right? Either this is something that I'm just wasting my time on, or I'm gonna do it.
You mentioned how you and your friend Jenny were kind of the inspiration for your cozy mysteries. What are some of your other inspirations that you have when you're writing your stories?
Just whatever strikes me as interesting or odd. Somebody sent me a video recently of didn't know the rabbits could swim, and I find that to be absolutely terrifying.
Oh man.
Um, it was terrifying, and I don't know why, because rabbits are like cuddly and warm and fuzzy, but watching that thing swim, I was like, oh no, 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 that's a horror. That's horror right there. That is another level. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be interesting? if there was a creature in another world that was warm and cuddly and then, hit, you know, sand or grass or something and suddenly became vicious. Wouldn't that be interesting? So I sometimes play around with short stories like that. I have another urban fantasy that I'm hoping to get out soon. And I thought, what would happen if we could just leave our world behind?
Hmm.
It's I was watching, I was probably, one of those shows on like Lifetime, like Deadly Women, or one of those where, somebody could get on a train in Chicago in the 19th century and then, get on the train in Chicago, get off of it in Denver, and not only be a totally different person, but be a totally different gender. They could totally start their lives over, right? And that could be done up until probably about 100 years ago, give or take. And that's not something today that we can really do. I mean, people have tried to do it. People have tried to, get around their electronic footprint,
Yeah.
but it's almost virtually impossible. And it's so interesting to me. And so sometimes I'll just see something, an article about, hey, I tried to lose my digital footprint for 48 hours. Here's how it went. And I'm like, wow, okay, so what happened if you just disappeared? Which also concerns some of my friends, because then they think that's kind of creepy that I'm talking about, what if we just disappeared?
What has been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced in the creation of your work?
I think one of the biggest challenges I've found is solitude.
How's-
The writing world is so lonely. There's nobody really there with you when you're writing your story. I mean, you might be in a writing group sitting at a table. You might be in a coffee shop or, somewhere, but it's really just you and the page. You have to figure out how to transition from solitude through the self doubt to the socialization part of it, where you get into your critiques, um, eventually get into hiring or working with an editor and querying and, things like that. And so it's almost like different parts. I have to think of it as like different parts of my brain. Like I'm activating different parts at different times.
Yeah.
Because there's times when I'm actively writing, I'm actively editing, I'm talking about writing, I'm learning, but and we spend a lot of time alone as writers, and a lot of time just with the page, the blank, sometimes blank page. And then the self-doubt, is it ever good enough? I mean, at some point I think you just have to put it out there and know that you did the best you can.
So, what advice would you give to other would-be authors who are watching this interview and thinking whether or not this is the thing for them?
Oh my gosh, it absolutely is. If you have a story that has not left you, that you keep thinking about, it doesn't matter if some people are like, oh, you have to tell your story, it'll change the world. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you need to write that for yourself, but it has to be written. There's a reason it has to be written. Yeah, and I guarantee you, even the process of writing it will change you and you will learn something.
So,
Yeah,
Emily,
thank you.
we're coming up on the last question here. How can people connect with you and how can they get copies of your work? What's the best way to go about doing that?
All of my work is on Amazon, Emily Karmazin. Uh, Everything can be found on Amazon, or you can shoot over to my website, emilykWriter.com. I'm also on Instagram, and I have a writing page, like a fan page on Facebook. So you can see any specials. I think I've got a couple free samples out right now. And books are kind of come and go from Kindle Unlimited. So always keep an eye out for that.
Well, Emily, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. A big thank you to Emily for being this month's Author Awareness interviewee. If you'd like to connect with her and get copies of her work, You can find those links down in the video description. You can also catch the unedited version of this conversation through my support page on Patreon.